All right, welcome back to the pod. Today I have Cynthia and Dr. Rich. Both are a power couple building their startup. Let's dive in. Can you tell us a little bit more about you and what you're building?
Certainly. So I'm Cynthia Abbott Kerr. I'm the founder of Wellpay AI, and we work with businesses to help them design and align their pay strategy. I'm an unlikely founder, and that I spent 15 years in corporate America climbing the corporate ladder. And I was actually on a trip to Japan with Richard. We were walking to Meiji Jing Temple, and he said, "I really think you should try to start your own business." And I hemmed and hawed, and there were competitors in the space and all this and that. He was like, "I'll build all the tech for you. Get out there with it. I'll build the tech." I should also preface it was like 100 degrees that day in Tokyo, so I might have been delirious when I agreed to this chapter, but that's how Wellpay came about. That's why when you look at our original I actually have a sticker here. When you look at a lot of our original logo design, we had the lotus flower, which is still prominent on our website, but a lot of that was an homage to our trip to Japan and how enlightening that was that led to this chapter. So that's
That's
me.
pretty sweet. That's pretty cool. And also the heat, playing a role with the decision making here. Someone was delirious.
I was years, and it's the
Oh,
longest mile I've ever walked from, like, the entrance of the gate to get the actual temple, and you're with this person you trust that you've been with for almost 2 decades, so they're like, "You can do it, you should do it," and you're like, "Eye of the tiger's," like, playing in your mind, and by the time
oh
you get
my
to the end,
gosh.
you're like, "I can definitely do it. I can do that." Okay.
I like it. That is part of the journey. That is a great
Right in.
metaphor. And it was your real experience. But how is it like building? We'll have to dive into what AI means here and how you're building and leveraging AI for it. But how is it building an AI company nowadays, and how are you thinking strategically, not just to implement it in your workflows, but also the ethics and the compliance behind it? Because you're working in a very compliant industry when it comes to with pay and comp and HR. So walk us through that, because that in itself is its own obstacle, really.
I think, and this is where Rich can definitely bring his AI expertise, I think it's the blend of both worlds.
Mm.
So I'll talk to him from a space of, here's what I've seen as a practitioner. Here's the pain points. Here's the strains. How do we make that less complicated? And he'll say, okay, based on all that information, here's what I think we should do while keeping in mind all of the tech constraint and all of the security that we have to maintain. When we started Pay, we built on the foundation of being SOX 2 compliant.
Yeah.
So, we have healthcare businesses that we support. We work with clients that are in the fintech space. So we started from a place of being able to provide a service that could be scrutinized, could stand up to heavy regulation. We were just on a call, and right now everybody's trying to figure out artificial intelligence and what I call like free range, right? Like your organic chickens that are just out there. That's dangerous.
Yeah.
You want to be thoughtful and measured in how you're bringing an AI into your organization, especially artificial intelligence that's going to impact compensation.
Mhm.
Because going out and calling out into the darkness, it's like drinking expired milk.
Yeah.
What's it gonna do for you? But Rich, that's really, I think, where your expertise comes in as well, as far as like, how are we thinking about the build, the technology that you've built, and you have 2 patents.
Okay, calm down with the patents. I've been working I built my first AI about 30 years ago, and I've been in the industry for the last 2 decades, since before we called it artificial intelligence, and
Yeah.
back when we call it expert systems and learning systems and machine learning and traditional machine learning now, which is so interesting because just 2 years ago it was called machine learning. Now it's traditional machine learning. It's insane. What's interesting is everybody always says this time is different. And in the I haven't seen a wave of technology in the last 2 decades that looks quite like this one.
Hmm.
And specifically with respect to security and safety, these new chatbots open up a whole new attack surface for systems that really the data practitioners prior to now have never really had to think about. And you have it on both the defensive side of the ball and the offensive side of the ball. So in some instances, if you're just using the sort of consumer grade chatbots that are out there, you are sharing your data with that company. They're going to use that data to train their model. And you don't know, 6 months from now, that may show up in an answer to some other user of the system. So at an absolute minimum, you should be using a Teams version or enterprise version of these bots. The second thing that's interesting is they're allowing the exponential scaling of different types of, say, phishing attacks and other things on that side as well. It's an interesting time to be in AI, but I think it's really critical to think about the tools that you're using, making sure that they're vetted, tested, and that you've got a trusted source to be able to use these tools. Now, to Cynthia's point around safety and security, over the last 2 decades, I've worked with the 25-man startup all the way to I built the data team at PepsiCo. And so I've seen the problems that you have as a startup, the problems you have as a scale up, the problems you have at massive enterprise, global enterprise scale. And while some of these questions are similar, they are absolutely not the same. On the security side of things, you want to be able to move very quickly as a startup. You want to maintain that nimbleness, but at the same time, governance becomes crucial for you because you don't want to share your customers' data. And at the enterprise side of the world, you have a lot more compliance. So to this point in finance, in biotech, in biomedical research, the regulatory elements are pretty significant. And so again, data governance becomes a critical element. And I think will even become more important as we move into the next decade.
I think it's almost, I wouldn't say intimidating, but like when you're starting right now to think about these things at such a high level, it almost forces or needs the requirement that you have to talk to an expert in the field, or at least have that consultative outreach. Like for people listening right now who are either in creating a new product within their services, or I have one guy who has his own agency, really successful, and then from there he built a separate product outside of that's particularly focused in AI. Like you have to know these things, because even when I hear, this might go a little too deep, but how MCP can connect everything, I don't trust all those connections. What's the data layer or the protection layer there? Should I actually trust this connection? How do I know it's safe? But a lot to think about as you're working and building this out. The interesting point here, that to bring it more practical to a lot of our listeners, is how are you, because with AI, you can either look down or up. You can look down, like, here's the thing, how we used to do like compensation or work pay. Like, here's how the traditional way, and here we're just going to automate it. And we're not that you can automate everything truly, right? But we're just going to do what we did before and use technology to do that, which I think is great. Like it's cost savings, efficiency, time saving, et cetera. But there's the flip side of what's the new potential that we can create that we couldn't do before. How are you currently looking at that within the company?
Wellpay, I think we can do both. We can look down and up. So we can, much to your point, we can automate a lot of things that maybe were pain points for teams prior, that now with technology, we can run smoothly and not be such a big thing, especially in the compensation space. In the look up, it's really a lot of the predictive modeling that is built and saying, we're looking at economic factors. We're looking at volatility in the market so that we can know how impactful pay is going to be. Because that's always been the question mark around, okay, we build this now, but how do we anticipate changes in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months? How do we have a nimble approach? We live in a very volatile, nimble world. The market is changing rapidly. How do we anticipate that? And we're the look up for what we're doing with Wellpay, and the ability to say, actually, this number is going to either cut down on this level of retention or increase it. Here's your volatility number, company A, depending on what we do. And we have some businesses that say, you know what, we're willing to risk it. We're willing to pay at this rate. We're going to see what happens. That's perfectly fine. I found that the predictive numbers that Richard produces tend to be highly accurate. And we've had businesses come back to us and say, hey, you were right. We had X amount of turnover, or we had X amount of retention on picking this decision and this outcome. So I think the look up is the predictive around how can we anticipate changes in the market, and also helping companies predict and anticipate changes around pay transparency, pay equity. It's no longer just good enough to say, this is what I pay you. I now have to explain to you how that's relevant to the business, and I have to track and make sure that you're not out of alignment with peers in that level or that role, because there could be large implications if you are out of alignment.
And then are you putting that data, like it's a turnover increase, or you're retraining the model for that specifically so that client has that experience based on the decision they made before to do a predictive for the future?
Yes. So we build it specific for each client. So let's begin with you. So the data that we use for you that will make your model smarter, we don't then have any bleed over into business B.
It's cool. Yeah, it's important.
Your data feeds you and your experience, and another client's data feeds them and their experience. So there's very clear firewalls between each segment. But yes, as we train it, it gets smarter. As you come back to it, it remembers. And as you put more insights into it, it's going to say, oh, okay, this is what you're trying to do. Or here's where you're looking to go. Got it. I'm learning from you and your style.
No, it's pretty cool. So it's almost like the longer you use, the better it gets. It's that flywheel, that's the compounding effect. To shift gears a little bit, how did you decide on business model and pricing? Because just to throw out some of the options, like either subscription based, and sometimes that's low tier, high tier, mid tier,
Yep.
also value based pricing or traditional services and labor. But you can do more now for the current retainers or project scopes than you could in the past. Like, how did you design the sweet spot between that, and what's your current go to market pricing strategy?
We do a combination of build for labor and also retainer and per hour. Because what we found, and Rich and I talked about this extensively, right? Like founders in the space that have set rates, and then you end up doing more work than the rate that you've set, and you're taking just a continuous loss, right?
Mm,
And we've moved into a time now where people think I'm going to pay one price and get 27 things,
yeah.
right? It's like the Bacchanal buffet, right? You're just out there, just putting everything on your plate. And so where we landed was retainer and then billable per hour, because even with technology, when you're
Mhm.
working with businesses, every client is going to have some level of high touch need,
Yeah.
either through their data debt, either through their manager learning, whatever they need. And to say universally, oh, this pencil is always going to be $2 everywhere. When you get into the human element, we found we need that flexibility of saying retainer plus billable. One, we're building a custom solution for you.
Mhm.
And two, it allows us to work and also stage gate with the client and say, okay, so we've gone through this much of retainer and we've done these 5 things. And the client says, yes, that makes sense. And I want these other 5 things now to run through retainer. And I'm prepared that billable will kick in. One fee. And then, because no matter what, when you engage with the business, especially whether you're a compensation consultant or a business consultant, when you're a consultant, the business is going to hand you everything
Yeah.
and try to have you solution everything. And so from that, we say, okay, so here's what it's going to look like to work with us. We're very upfront with our pricing with our clients and say, all right, here's what this would be. We sign engagements and we move forward in the work. You have more traditional consultancies that aren't rolling out artificial intelligence to their clients the way we are, and they're still a price per hour model.
Yeah.
And then, especially in the compensation space, you're going to pay different rates for different levels,
Yeah.
right? So if you're a managing director, you're going to make $700 an hour. And if you're an executive director, you're going to make $1,000 an hour. And as someone to be responsible for signing off the invoices, I was like, how many people joined this call? What? I've got 10 different hourly rates and price points.
Yeah.
Who touched this file? Like it can creep very quickly.
Yeah.
So we have one billable per hour rate when you work with Wellpay. So you don't have that scope creep of like, oh, please don't invite the principal consultant to the call. We don't need this to balloon, because we really want to get to the space of helping our clients make compensation decisions more efficiently and more
Yeah.
quickly.
Yeah, that's all they care about. Like they don't care about the bill. They do when they're like, I don't want that person here if they're going to bill me for X, but they care about the result. And that was the interesting part that I want to kind of like nuance with you here, because I feel like one, you're taking something that already exists, but you're attaching the data and the tech component to it, which is differentiation. And also the more people that use it, the better it gets. You have that network effect. Um, but the interesting part here is you're not just selling it like a true software, which I think is important. You're still selling it like a service enhanced with your, I don't know, your third or fifth, I don't know how many team members you have, like with that employee that can literally do all these things at the predictive and they don't get tired. And I think that's an interesting point here, because I feel like this is going to happen a lot in different agencies, consultancies, strategy work, you name it. We're going to have to move to a data component and a data layer, and the pricing will always be the number one question. Do I just add
Yeah.
that plus my billable, or it's more outcome-based pricing at some points, or is it a flat fee plus or like cost plus? So it's pretty fascinating to hear that and see that, because you're essentially building out. Are you doing like the entire data lake, database, and then analytics of that per client?
Right?
So interestingly enough, you mentioned that AI gets smarter the more clients we do. The AI actually gets smarter every day anyway. And
Yeah.
part of the reason for that is we have and Cynthia mentioned that I've got patents on a new class, if you will, of AI systems. So these are systems that learn continuously. They're not the kind of way you train them one time and then you use them for inference after that. These models learn every single day, whether clients using them or not. And so the difference in the way that we approach data, the difference in the way that we approach AI and their architecture difference is pretty remarkable. Pretty remarkable. And so the data systems that we use, again, highly flexible. So today we're working on a broad-based project. Tomorrow we want to add inequity. Day after that, we want to do executive comp. The data system will actually flex to the need. Again, similarly, it's okay. Now I have all the survey data in the system. I've got the employee data in the system. I want to start tracking. There are some clients who will help them all the way through merit. So the entire system is designed to be highly flexible to the client's need. That's also why it isn't just a tool that we hand to you. We're firm believers that AI can do a lot of things exceedingly well, and there are some things it does not do well.
Yeah.
And so that's where you need that human element, that human touch, to be able to deliver those customized strategies to those customers.
How much is involved? Because I see that and feel that all the time too, even though I'm on like the go-to-market front. How much quality assurance are you doing manually with the work that you're doing outside of the stop gaps that I know that you've either engineered in or prompted in? Like, how much actually needs to go through your filter or a team member's filter before you ship it to clients?
Yeah, so it's probably fair to say that Wellpay was built as a data and AI system first, which we then do compensation on. So a lot of the quality assurance, a lot of the model testing, a lot of the performance testing for the system is fully automated. And that is to say the AI tests itself, or more precisely, one AI tests another AI. And we'll identify problem areas that need my attention. Some of these systems have been running, 4 and 5 years without me having to touch them at all.
No.
And yeah, so again, the level of proficiency in some of these systems is exceedingly high. And in some of them require a little bit more touch. There's something that the system hasn't seen as much or hasn't had as much time interacting with me or with Cynthia. Definitely needs a little bit more hand holding, but it also has a way to recognize on its own, the platform itself, hey, this is something I know I can do well. And this is something I need a little bit more information. I need more clarity from the user.
Yeah, and that's one of the key points that I also want to highlight here is that it's not a magic silver bullet that'll take care of everything. You still need to have a human in the loop, or even the orchestrator to orchestrate its execution to make sure that it's actually delivering value. Have you, obviously not in this scenario, but how have you communicated the value to clients? Because sometimes that's the number one question that everyone in the market tends to ask is, how do I ROI leveraging AI? And sometimes those use cases, some people like, it doesn't make sense. Here it does make sense. But how are you communicating that value? Or is it through the work that itself and then the final output communicates the value? Or is it the process itself? Like, where do you see the greater gains?
I think for our upfront conversations with clients, let's say a prospective client's reached out to us and says, hey, we want to engage in this work. For us, it's the time component. You could go to a larger consultancy. You absolutely could. They're going to tell you that this work is going to take 6 to 9 months, or
Okay.
not tell you any timeline at all. And you'll basically be a vendor manager. And you're going to be chasing spreadsheets and junk and clunk and sending it to them, and then they're going to lose it, and you're going to have to be a vendor
Yeah,
manager.
sounds terrible. That sounds horrible.
It's horrific. Yes. I used to sit at my computer and think, I went to graduate school for this.
Yeah.
And I'm a whole vice president, and a consultant is like, hey, Cynthia, can you resend me the file? I sent it to you a month ago. We have a meeting in a week. What have you been doing this whole time?
It's
What
crazy.
what is happening? So I think that for our clients in the initial, it's a lot of, one, we can ingest your data in any format. So I don't have some strange template you've got to fill out to make it work. Give me everything. So immediately I'm going to take the weight and the stress off of you. And I'm going to say, just give me everything, right? I'm not judging you. Trust me. We're going to ingest everything. Pay Pro is going to highlight and flag anything we need to review and talk about. And I'm going to come back to you. And I'm going to say, okay, So either here's some jobs that are maybe out of alignment to the market based on job description, all the pieces that go into compensation. But it puts you in the driver's seat to really be the designer and editor. You don't have to be the spreadsheet expert, the vendor manager, the tracker, the tracer, all the things. You can be the strategist is really where I think Pay has such a strong offering to market. And the fact that because we're using technology and we can move so quickly, like what I just outlined here would normally take maybe 2 months. I'm going to come back to you in a matter of days
Dang.
and say, so here's what we're seeing. Here's what we're finding. What would you like to do? We can conclude projects in 30 to 45 days. Because what I always say is when, HR leaders come into a role or maybe there's a new expectation that the organization has, you have two types of debt. You have physical debt that you inherit. And being that you've also both been people leaders and dealt with human resource teams, you know how cumbersome it is to get information. That's because there's physical debt and that information is spread 27 different places, right? 15 different ways. And then there's the debt of expectation. When a business signals, and that could be your CEO is in favor of it, your ELT team is in favor of it. Hey, we need to do some type of comp analysis, comp work. Are we aligned to market? You don't have 9 months to come back to them with a recommendation, with a solution, with market highlights.
Because it changes literally every day.
It changes every day, and they've also moved on. When you get the buy-in to take action and have work like this done, you've got to move fast. You've got to come back in 30 days and say, all right, here's what I found. Here's where I think we need to make moves. And the CEO says, okay, you know what? Yeah, or let's set on it, but I like this. I want that. But when you come back after 9 months, they that you
It's
did
already
that.
outdated. Yeah.
Yeah, they moved on. So I think that's where we can really help the HR function move forward rapidly is we can get in and be the 15-person team in your pocket that's going to help you make these decisions and shape these outcomes is where I think we have the most competitive advantage. And a lot of what Richard's built for Wellpay also stem from the fact that in consulting, there oftentimes tends to be this, you're a premier consultant if you're at a big four, or
Oh,
if
yeah.
you're
Yeah.
at one of these premier survey companies. And I've often held the thesis that with technology, you don't need that. That Hayden's just as smart as your Aon consultant, that I don't need to have walked the earth for 60 years and clank and bang 15 spreadsheets. I can have technology that makes me just as smart. This is really, I think, the next frontier of being competitive in this space, and also limiting all the hands in the pot.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not going to need 16 people. I can do it with 3.
That's the interesting part too, is like the speed to value, the speed to the outcome. And then also you referenced it here, but also a project getting done in months versus like a month also speaks to like the need or the potential for value-based pricing, not just hourly-based pricing. 'Cause that's one of the things that I found, like I don't have to spend X amount of hours, 20 hours doing the same thing. Like I can do more in those 20 hours, but now it's like you can do it much, much, much faster. What are some of and you mentioned strategy work, and I think this is where I want to close the loop here. From my observations, I think hourly will be obsolete eventually, depending on if it's human labor or actually AI labor. But the other key thing is I believe that thinking on thinking, which equals strategy, is going to be one of the most important assets that we can deliver, because we'll either be orchestrators of different agents or different workflows that are automated with leveraging some task-based agents and reasoning agents and big data. Where do you see this transforming? Because I feel like this is a new era of people who know the strategy and can execute on that. But now the execution flow isn't another human. It's either orchestration of multiple data layers and or like multiple AI agents to execute the work. Where do you stand in terms of the most important skill sets for today and also in the next 3 years?
So I'll start, and then I think, Rich, you've got a lot of insight in here because we're seeing it in Moderna just combined their HR and IT teams. So we're seeing these skill sets overlap. We're seeing these skill sets. It Bloom's taxonomy, right? What can you do with the information that you have? Can you think strategically? Can you make recommendations? And also the workforce going forward, you're going to have people that are responsible for managing these agents. And Rich has also built agents for other businesses, managed them, put safety guards in place. Because I think to your point, Raul, we're gonna see, I think, less hourly worker, but we're also gonna see more gig work as a result of technology and agents. Gen Z does not wanna take any type of leadership role or path. There's a new study that just came out that said millennials are exhausted. We, millennial here, we feel like we've been just smushed between the decision makers and the workforce, and it has led to the outcomes we thought it would lead to. And that Gen Z is, listen, just pay me for the projects I work on. I want to live out of my trailer and drive around the country. I'm just not trying to be embedded in all of these businesses. So I think that we're going to see that shift because ultimately you need people that can run technology to achieve certain outcomes for a business.
Yeah.
But I think we're going to move away from the traditional, you work here, you have all these years that you work here model, just because the expectation of the workforce, the technology is changing as well. And that you still have, though, demand for output. So these businesses, I think, are going to have to move how they think about labor and technology
That is true.
to be successful. But Rich, curious to get your thoughts because I know you follow a lot of these trends and read about it in large detail.
So first of all, I thoroughly agree with what Cynthia is talking about. And I think technical skills are still critically important in the AI space. But what is really interesting about how these systems are evolving and what makes this wave of AI very different than anything we've seen in the last couple of decades is the number of times I put my product hat on and the number of times I put my leadership hat on. A lot of times, if you're trying to get the best out of these models, you have to be pretty descriptive in terms of what you're asking them to do. And in a way, that's a type of leadership. Because if you're asking, whether you're asking AI agents or folks to follow you and to do a thing that you need done, you got to give them an idea of what it is you need done. And so being clear about how you scope a question or an issue for these AI agents, I think is critically important. And so are there technical elements? Sure. Will those become less important as data solutions and AI orchestration, to your point earlier, becomes more ubiquitous? Absolutely. But I think the kind of back to the core skill around how do you give clear direction and use systems in a way that helps them get to the answer you need to get them to becomes more critical going forward. So leadership to me is a massive unlock. And I think that's true whether you're working with AI systems or continuing to work with other humans. In my mind, it's one of the largest gaps really in the economy. Trillions of dollars lost to inefficiency, really down to bad leadership, bad management. The lack of engagement of employees across the US really speaks to that. The broad disengagement of Gen Z says the same thing. Nobody wants to be a people manager because they've seen those middle managers, those early career managers get absolutely hammered between the employees that are complaining and the senior management ridiculous demands. I think it's something of a lost art and a space that it was never easy, if you will. I've been training managers for 2 decades, and it's never been an easy thing to help people lead other people.
Themselves first.
For sure, 100%. You got to start with being able to manage self before you can manage anything else. But I do think that it's actually gotten worse over time. I think the level of demand and the complexity has actually gotten higher, while at the same time, the level of training and interactivity has actually dropped off. So I actually think it's harder today than it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago.
Yeah. A mix of culture, a mix of technology, also what's happening on the macroeconomics. It's pretty fascinating to see. So then what's the solve? Like, what do you think is, if we go back to the major key skill set?
Being a leader is, part of it is embedded in your personality, I think.
Yeah.
There's a core curiosity. What led me to leadership was just down to really the curiosity of trying to understand how things work. And then realizing that the bigger the problem I needed to solve or wanted to solve, the more scale I needed, the more other very smart people I needed to work with. And that led me to that space of saying, okay, how do I gather together a group of incredibly smart people, smartest people in the world, to solve a very complex and difficult problem that very few people are right now care about, but 5 years from now is going to be critically. It started with working on antibiotics in our food supply. It was me and a research group that got together that said, listen, I think we can take antibiotics out of poultry. and make our food supply safer. And we said, okay, we figured that out. Then we did the same thing for dairy products. And then we started looking at things in shellfish. So almost all the things that you eat every day in some way, shape, or form are affected by the work of me and my colleagues who started out with how do we solve this massive problem to improve public health or to make food more accessible in a way that people aren't really thinking about right now, but 5 years from now, 10 years from now, critically important. Yeah.
It's fascinating. Curiosity on frameworks, communicating that with others, and also being able to communicate with self. I think it boils down to the curiosity, the spark, but also communication, even when you're chatting with the LLM.
That's 100% right. 100%. So that's where I think it starts. And to the extent that we as leaders today can help tomorrow's leaders get into those, to spark that curiosity, to get them interested in solving bigger and larger world style problems. I think that's absolutely something we should be doing. And frankly, need to be giving back more.
I like that. Better be on your mission statement also, because it's a bigger mission of how you're tackling that problem. But Cynthia, Rich, I appreciate you both being on. But for our listeners, where's the best place for them to follow your work and see what you're up to?
Certainly. We're very active on LinkedIn. So I'm Cynthia Abbott Kerr on LinkedIn. And you can always go out to our website, pay.ai. There's a calendar link on the website if you'd like to connect with us. We're always happy to talk all things compensation and AI. And thank you so much for having us on. It's been a pleasure.
It's been fun. Put all those links in the show notes and we'll go from here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the podcast. If you'd like to get more of these podcasts, please go ahead and subscribe to wherever you're watching or listening to the pod. If you have any suggestions or questions that you want me to answer on the pod, or you have a guest that you want me to interview, please go ahead and email me all of your suggestions and questions at podcast@dogoodwork.io. That's podcast@dogoodwork.io. If you'd like to give me public feedback, you can go on Apple Podcasts, and from there, you can leave up to a 5-star review. I would greatly appreciate that. If you like more free resources where you can get my best strategies to help you increase your company's performance and scale profitably, you can get handpicked articles to propel your growth, and you can get trainings and discussions that I give freely online, as well as low-cost resources such as my books and guides. You can get all of that by going to dogoodwork.io/resources. 90% of all of these resources are not behind any email opt-ins. You can get instant access by going to dogoodwork.io/resources. Now, if you'd like to accelerate your progress and shorten the gap between information and action and start seeing results in your business, let's work together to increase your company's performance and scale profitably and serve more clients without the overwhelm. You can request a free clarity call to see how we can best support you to reach your goals by going to dogoodwork.io/apply. Again, that's dogoodwork.io/apply. As always, it's an honor to be a small part in your journey. This is Raul Hernandez. Do good work.